Mauricio Pochettino has named his 23-man USMNT roster for CONCACAF Nations League games at the end of March against Panama and potentially Canada or Mexico. And today I'm giving my thoughts on the roster as well as commenting on a few things that Pochettino said in his press conference that I think are pertinent to this roster. What up, guys? I'm Pete Douthit, host of the 11 Yanks Show. We talk about everything USMNT soccer. And of course, national team camp is what we talk about the most because that's the focus of this channel. Smash that like button before you watch the video and smash subscribe if you're new. So let's talk about this roster. I would say it's a very good roster until we get to the forwards. That's where it gets a little weird, and we'll talk about that later. But sure, we have a lot of injuries. We have guys that are not here or guys that are no longer injured but are only now coming back. And so it came too soon for them, guys like Serginho Dest or maybe a Haji Wright. But Pochettino is bringing the guys that he thinks will be able to win the Nations League. And make no mistake, he has to win the Nations League. The absolute bare minimum for our national team should be to be dominant in CONCACAF, especially because we're playing at home. And he has that responsibility to do what even Greg Berhalter, for all of his faults, was able to do consistently, and that is to win your domestic competition. So this is the first time that Pochettino has real pressure on him to get past Panama and then go on to Mexico and Canada. Speaking of, I think we need to be careful as a fan base, as a national team, of overlooking Panama. It's easy to see Panama as like the easy game in this series. We just got to get past Panama, which we will, and then go on to Mexico and Canada. But it's a bit of a trap game in that way. We've seen this many times in soccer, where a better team underestimates a, not as good team in terms of quality. And don't get me wrong, Panama has some quality in there, but of course they're not as stacked as we are in terms of talent. But at the end of the day, it's 90 minutes. You go and underestimate an opponent, shit can happen very easily. And I think that's something that I don't really see being a conversation that much in the fan base, is the number one priority is to beat Panama. After that, we can look forward, because I'm telling you, you don't want to sleepwalk through a game like Panama and all of a sudden you're out. It's 90 minutes and we need to treat it like a final. We need to treat that Panama game like it matters, because it does. And it would be a shambolic embarrassment for this team to not get past Panama. All right, let's get into the roster now. And for goalkeepers, we have Matt Turner, Patrick Schulte, and Zach Steffen. Matt Turner is obviously the number one. I expect him to start both of these games. And then Zach Steffen, who played in Camp Cupcake and did reasonably well, is there with Patrick Schulte, who has been a mainstay in Pochettino's rosters. The guys missing out, I guess, would be Diego Cochin, who's been in every Pochettino roster so far, and potentially also Ethan Horvath, who has recovered his starting spot at Cardiff and is playing pretty well, but maybe not well enough over a period of time to earn a spot back in this roster. Like I said in my preview video, I don't have a strong opinion about goalkeepers 2 and 3 right now, just because I don't think anybody stands out in a meaningful way. You could put Horvath, you could put Cochin, maybe Matt Freese should get a look, you should argue. But really, none of these guys are guys that we could consider reliable players that should be in this roster. So I'm fine with these 3 goalkeepers. I probably would have preferred to see Diego Cochin there because he is the future, but, he's still playing academy ball in Barcelona. And, maybe Pochettino thought for these competitive games, he's not a guy that's necessary to have. And Zach Steffen did, like I said, he did reasonably well in January camp. I still don't think he's the answer in any way, shape, or form. But it is what it is. 2 and 3 aren't going to play unless there's an injury or a red card. So I don't expect it to matter that much, especially because in terms of talent and quality, there's not a lot of separation here. 3 fullbacks were called up: Joe Scally, Anthony Robinson, and Marlon Fossey. Serginho Dest was not in the provisional roster. I made that error in the previous video. I thought he was, but I'm pretty sure I saw his name in there, but I was wrong. I did not. He just came back from injury, and that's fair. Let him stay with PSV, continue to get back to full fitness, and hopefully have a really good end of the season going into Gold Cup. Now, in the past, Poch has only brought 2 fullbacks. But if you're going to bring a third fullback, I think Marlon Fossey is the guy. He's been playing well once again for Standard Liège. I would like him to take a step up out of the Belgian league at some point, or at least to a better Belgian team. But his one cap against New Zealand last year, he actually did quite well. So him being here as backup to Joe Scally, who I expect to start, is perfectly fine. Now, we also have other guys that can play, fullback. Austin Trusty and Tim Ream can both offer cover at left back. Joe Scally can offer cover at left back. And then at right back, Tim Weah, Yunus Musa can both play there. Tyler Adams can play there. Chris Richards can play there. We do have a lot of cover and options at that position, which I like, because I think quality on the field is more important than just going straight down the depth chart. At some point, you come to a depth chart and you're like, yeah, there's no point in bringing this guy. And I'll address this later when we get to strikers. Center backs. Probably our top 5 center backs right now: Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, and Cameron Carter-Vickers. Mark McKenzie and Chris Richards have both been in really good form for Crystal Palace and Toulouse, respectively. And I would like to see them start this game, but I don't know what Poch's plans are. We know he really likes Tim Ream. And by the way, if you talk to Charlotte fans, Tim Ream hasn't been that good for them, albeit playing at left back this season. I expect Tim Ream to be here. Actually, I don't expect that. I was going to say he should be there as more of an assistant coach / leader / depth piece at center back, because he continues to be in decline. And I am worried that by the time we get to the World Cup 14, 15 months from now, that aging and decline will only continue, especially when he's playing in a league that isn't, I don't expect him to improve in MLS. Cameron Carter-Vickers, some erratic form for Celtic, but pretty good in the Champions League for the most part, outside of one goal against Bayern. Austin Trusty's been good in the Champions League. They both have had mistakes at times, even in the Scottish League. But he hasn't really seen Austin Trusty, and he certainly hasn't seen Cameron Carter-Vickers. So we'll see. I think this is going to be an interesting look into who Pochettino rates when everybody is healthy. Celebration, no Miles Robinson. About time. Is he finished? I don't know. But I thought he would for sure bring Miles because he has really liked him. But Miles' last meaningful game against Mexico, he was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And Mexico is not the powerhouse that they, were before. This was a Liga MX roster, and he got completely bamboozled by Huerta several times, including aerially, which was hilarious to me. But Miles Robinson, as I've been saying for years, is not USMNT quality, and it is good to see him not included in this roster. They did ask Pochettino in the press conference about Mark McKenzie, and they said, in the past, you've started McKenzie and Ream. Is that your preferred pairing? And he said, hey, look, we have a lot of good center backs. He was a little cagey, but he, was saying that we're going to take a look at all of our guys. We like them all. And I think, Pochettino, the feeling I got from him when he spoke in this press conference is like, yeah, the form you're in for club is great, but I want to feel you in camp. Like, I want to get to know you as a person. I want to see what you bring to the table. I want to see the best ways to use you. And a guy like, Chris Richards is really the first time he's going to get to see him because of injuries last fall. I guess we don't really know what his center back pairing is going to be. I would prefer to see Chris Richards and Mark McKenzie because I think they're in the best form, but that'll be an interesting look in, when the game starts, what his starting lineup will be with everybody healthy. Midfielders now, and a little bit of a surprise here: Giovanni Reyna, Weston McKennie, Tanner Tessman, Diego Luna, Tyler Adams, and Johnny Cardoso. He was asked about Giovanni Reyna in the press conference, and I think, it was Adam Bells from Scuffed who said he looks like he's not even really trying at Dortmund. So, how do you plan to use him? And Pochettino said, look, we're not going to be able to bring Gio Reyna for Gold Cup because it's, the Club World Cup. Whether or not Gio Reyna is going to even be in the Club World Cup roster, let's wait and see. He might, be getting a move, or maybe they don't want him there. I don't know, but it seems to think that this is our only opportunity to see Giovanni Reyna. And yes, we want to see more from him. He said that. But again, he also said, I want to see him in camp. I want to talk to him. I want to feel him as a player. I want to know who he is, what he prefers, what he can bring to the table, and we need to push him. And he's absolutely right. Giovanni Reyna needs to be pushed. I, who has been one of Reyna's biggest supporters / defenders, would not start him against Panama on recent form, because in the past, yes, he wasn't playing for Dortmund, but when he did, he would generally play well. More recently, he's been playing for Dortmund and not playing well. So at this point, it's like, well, sorry, Gio. And Weston McKennie's been playing as an attacking midfielder for Juve and doing quite well. So my midfield trio to start would be Adams, Cardoso and McKennie, with Cardoso playing, in the double pivot with Adams, maybe a bit more advanced, maybe a bit more like an 8. We can certainly use his distribution. Cardoso hasn't really showed up for the national team in the past, though, so this is a big chance for him to really show up and show that he can be that guy and try to lock down a starting position. He was quite cagey on Tyler Adams, actually. They asked him about Tyler and his form at Bournemouth, and we all know Tyler's been in really great form since he came back from his injury. And he was like, yeah, but, let's see, there's other midfielders too. He's like, yeah, I like Tyler. We tried to sign him at Chelsea, but he didn't seem as enthusiastic about Tyler as we are. And that surprised me a little bit. Sure, he could just be downplaying expectations. He could be trying to not show his hand. It's hard to know. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. But he was significantly less excited about Tyler Adams than I expected him to be. What's interesting to me about this midfield is that we have a lot of attacking midfielders and not a lot of 8s or box-to-box midfielders, right? You have Gio, you have Diego, and you have Weston McKennie, who play more attacking roles, and then Tessman, Adams, and Cardoso are more defensive roles. Now, sure, McKennie can play as an 8, he can play in a double pivot. Poch did also mention Yunus Musa, that even though he's listed as a winger, they see him as a guy who can also play in midfield and also at the wing. So that was interesting. I don't know what Poch is going to do with this starting lineup. Again, our data on Pochettino is so limited in terms of what he likes and what he wants that it's sometimes a tough call to make. Also, considering he's had so many injuries to deal with so far in his tenure, we haven't even seen, him with a full roster available to be like, well, what is his preferred starting 11? I hope that in this camp we'll get more data and we'll get more glimpses into what he likes, who he prefers, how he likes them to play, etc., etc. Let's talk about the wide forwards now. Christian Pulisic, Timo Weah, and Yunus Musa. And I'm a little bit surprised not to see Alejandro Zendejas in this roster, considering the form that he has been in, and considering the fact that Haji Wright is injured. We don't have a ton of other wingers. He may even play Christian Pulisic centrally. It's hard to know, but I think we need to have more wingers in this roster. And to that point, I probably would have brought Brendan Aronson to play as a winger, even if it's just as a pressing winger. Look, I'm no fan of Brendan Aronson, but compared to some of the guys on this roster, I think he could fill a need, certainly in the press, off the bench maybe, but as a depth option if we have any injuries. And so I'm a little bit surprised to see only 2 true wingers, and Musa, who can play as a winger because he is very good on the dribble. The problem with Musa, and it has always been his problem, is his end product, right? Goals and assists are very hard to come by for him. And it's a lot of it is a decision making in the final third is not good. Some of it is a shyness, almost a reluctance to really make a call in the final third and decide, are you going to cross, are you going to shoot, are you going to lay off? And I hope we start to see more end product from Yunus Musa, but that hasn't been his strong suit ever. And in midfield, we see a Yunus Musa who, again, can charge through midfield with the ball at his feet and can be quite smooth at times, but is quite limited in his distribution, particularly long range or creative distribution. So I guess I understand why Yunus Musa is played wide, but I just don't understand why we didn't bring more wingers, especially because we brought strikers who, in my opinion, shouldn't be here. Christian Pulisic is back in form for Milan, getting 2 goals on the weekend. Weah's having a very good season for Juve. I would absolutely start both of them. I mean, that's like duh at this point. My questions is more if one of them gets injured or needs a rest or we have to rotate, who do we bring on the wing? It's going to have to be Yunus Musa, and I'm not thrilled about that because I've yet to see that he can be an effective winger for either club or country. Talking about forwards now, and we have Josh Sargent, Patrick Agyemang, and Brian White. Josh Sargent, this is the moment for him, right? All your goals for Norwich, all your form, all of that is great, but you've got to do it in a USMNT jersey, and thus far, he hasn't. Now, there's some caveats to that. There's been a lot of injuries in the last couple of years, particularly ill-timed injuries right before camp. He hasn't gotten to play the quote-unquote easy games. He was reasonably good at the World Cup in Qatar. But this is what we have. I don't agree with either Agyemang or Brian White being here because I don't think they offer any quality. And we have been fooled before by Camp Cupcake performances. I mean, look at Jesus Ferreira in that 2021 Camp Cupcake where people were saying he was a lock and a good player, and he followed that up with a 24-goal contribution season for Dallas. But it didn't translate when they played even a decent opponents, much less good ones. And I think the same is true of Patrick Agyemang and Brian White. They are both serviceable MLS forwards with very low upside. Patrick Agyemang doesn't have a single goal in the first 3 games of MLS. And again, people say, well, it's just 3 games. Yeah, but it's MLS. The defending in MLS is so bad. If you're a national team player, you should be balling out in MLS. And, even last season, 10 goals is not exactly, world class in MLS. And he's 24 years old, right? And then you've got Brian White, who has been a sort of journeyman striker in MLS his entire life. He's 29 years old. He's a decent finisher, but I really don't see what these 2 guys can contribute from a striking perspective. And this is why I was in favor of you bring Josh Sargent and you have Tim Weah there as a backup. Then you have the opportunity to bring a Paxton Aronson, right? A Paxton Aronson is a guy that maybe deserves a look after his form for Utrecht in the Eredivisie this season. Maybe you do bring Brendan Aronson instead. Maybe Alejandro Zendejas should be there because that gives you more flexibility and, frankly, more quality. It's the lack of quality where Agyemang and Brian White are really baffling. Because if Josh Sargent is not performing, do I feel comfortable with Agyemang, coming off the bench to try to rescue us? I mean, not really. And I think that's fair. Maybe he's good in the air. I don't know. His hold-up game looked very suspect to me. Again, the Camp Cupcake games are not good measures of a player's quality because it's a friendly game against opponents bringing experimental players that don't really care. And so it's just hard to tell if that means anything, even if you score a goal in Camp Cupcake. But I've said my piece on this. These are the strikers. I would like to see a starting lineup where you have Turner in goal, a back 4 of Richards, McKenzie, A-Rob, and Joe Scally, a midfield of Adams, Cardoso, McKennie, Pulisic and Weah on the wings, and Sargent up top. But time will tell what Pochettino does against Panama. All right, guys, those are my thoughts on this roster. Give me yours in the comments. I do want to make a quick apology for the weekend. I tried to do a stream on Sunday, and I had to delete it and end the stream earlier than I wanted to because we had technical issues. I'm not sure if it was with the internet or with my laptop. I changed internet about a year ago because Spectrum was not working for me and I got AT&T fiber. And since then, I have had no problems until Sunday. And then we had a problem. I'm sorry about that. I will try to fix that. I actually am moving houses this weekend. Thank you for your patience. And again, I apologize. I know I don't want to go into a stream and it be poor quality. And hopefully on Sunday, it will be better. Thanks for watching. Smash that like button before you go. And thank you to Bet Online for sponsoring this stream. Have a great one, guys. I'll talk to you soon.